So today, as Scott generously introduced us, we are going to be covering a presentation for 5G for law enforcement, specifically what is possible in the law enforcement space with 5G on the horizon. We're going to talk about a lot of great applications, specifically the overview of the agenda of what we're discussing today. 1, 5G networks overview. What all is packed into that 5G topology and what does the rollout of that network look like? 2, new 5G applications in terms of what will be enabled with 5G. So we'll dream a little bit about what's on the horizon. Number 3, safer 5G field operations. 4, what you can do today in terms of what you can expect for 5G to roll out into your area and what conversations you can start having to prepare to receive 5G capabilities for your agency. Lastly, we will do a Q&A. We do have questions in the chat. Scott, when we get there, I'm going to ask you to help me read those since I'm in presenter mode, and we'll make sure to get those answered for you there at the end. Again, host Scott Swisher, who teed us off, me, Reed Perryman, Director of Public Sector Sales. So with that being concluded, let's dive right into the first portion of our webinar, 5G Networks Overview. We're going to talk about the current state of 5G, improvements to 5G, or the attributes of 5G that are going to enable some of these solutions that we'll talk about a little bit later in another section. And we're going to do a little bit of definition work with key terms. So they're the improvements, but what do they mean? We'll try to crack that code and simplify those for you so it doesn't sound like tech jargon. We're really on the verge of a 5G revolution. I mean, it really is a very exciting and transformational time in the wireless world. Of course, LTE is here. It's going to be here for a while. It's the backbone and the core that 5G is being built off of. But what's incredibly exciting is as you look at this graphic and some of the different applications present here, from drones to surveillance with AI integration like biometrics, facial recognition, heat vision, gunshot detection systems there on the bottom left, wearables down there on the bottom right to provide GPS location or biometrics of an officer that's wearing those, or even inside that vehicle where an in-vehicle router with an external antenna can empower all of the other pieces of technology in your vehicle environment, in your squad environment, to enable you to do your job more efficiently and safely. And then lastly, how all of this is real-time data, really made real-time data and funneled into key software solutions, monitoring solutions like Blue Force Command, where key command staff can be an additional set of eyes, the guy in the chair, if you will, if you think about James Bond, monitoring all these fields with unprecedented amounts of real-time information to help key law enforcement agencies make the best response in the timeliest manner to increase safety and efficiency in field operations. So let's talk about a little bit about how 5G is layered, if you will, today, or how it's constructed or composed. So we like to talk about 5G in terms of a layer cake approach. So think about a layer cake that you've eaten in your life, maybe 3 flavors: chocolate, vanilla, strawberry. And so just like that layer cake with those 3 flavors, there's 3 layers or flavors of 5G, if you will. You've got low band, mid band, and high band, all with different purposes and throughput. So low band is predominantly going to be your 600 to 900 megahertz. This, as you can see by the graphic there, the wavelengths are very spaced apart. They're going to propagate very far. That means they're going to reach out into those outlying areas, those challenging areas where coverage is traditionally an issue. And they're going to have great penetration into buildings. So difficult to reach spaces in terms of old construction buildings with a lot of rebar in the buildings, metallic roofs, or even basements that have been tricky and challenging to receive reception before, are going to reap the benefit of low band 5G on that low band spectrum. Typically, you're going to see 300 and 250 megabits per second on low band, comparable to LTE Advanced and LTE Pro today. It is a slight upgrade to 4G, though, in terms of propagation and how far it's going to be able to reach into outlying or challenging areas. Next, you've got midband. Midband is going to reside on the 2.5 to 6 gigahertz bandwidth. It's going to cover about anywhere to 100 to 900 to a gig download speed, megabit, gigabit. And it's going to be, the standard for midband is going to be as fast as cable broadband networks today, meaning in midband, you truly start looking at wireless as primary and cutting the cord on your traditional wireline services that are running through conduits in the ground. So that's going to be midband's advantages. Doesn't exactly propagate as far as low band, probably isn't going to be as pervasively available as low band, but for those areas, predominantly suburban areas in good sized cities, towns, county areas, there will be mid-band coverage, and agencies can expect to leverage some of those near gigabit speeds in order to either cut the cord, back up the cord, or connect their patrol fleets. And lastly, you've got high band 5G. High band's going to reside on those really top level of the cellular spectrum and radio waves, but 25 to 39 gigahertz. When you hear about 5G today, this is what people traditionally think about. High band 5G, 1 to 10 gigabits. It's blazing fast. It's comparable to fiber, but guess what? The propagation, as you can see by our graphic, not that great. In fact, it's predominantly going to be point-to-point, highly reliant on those microcells that the carriers are building out, and then a point-to-point antenna infrastructure to deliver it to key agencies and businesses that have invested in the architecture for mid-band 5G. Again, it's mainly going to affect your large metro areas, and then there's going to be a lot of private companies probably contracting the carriers to build out high band. So not a huge play for pervasively through the United States for law enforcement agencies, but we still wanted to cover that today. Let's move on to glossary of key terms. What is 5G going to do for you, and what does it mean? So we've got 4 terms to cover here: capacity, bandwidth, latency, and multi-access edge compute. That last one sounding quite technical, but I promise we'll dispel and demystify that when we get to that slide. But for now, let's talk about capacity. How is 5G going to improve capacity, and what is capacity? Capacity is this: number of clients or users or devices, endpoints, that can concurrently connect to a tower. So what we've been told out there is that the current 4G tower today supports somewhere between the 1,000, 2,000, upwards around 5,000, depending on how much infrastructure is dedicated to it today. But once you scale up to 5G, some reports are claiming that 5G towers are going to be easily able to support tens of thousands of users, clients, and devices concurrently, which that increased capacity is going to be very important when we talk about one of our future applications of 5G a little bit later on in the presentation. Secondly, let's talk about bandwidth. This is simply how much data can be sent and received through a cellular connection. Think about this almost like a boating channel or canal, right? You've got a little tiny stream feeding out into the ocean. You can really only get a small boat up that stream. Well, with 5G, we're going to widen that access, that channel. It's going to be very wide, and you're going to be able to fit. Think of it this way. I know it's not exactly an apples to apples metaphor here, but think about that big barge freighter you're going to be able to fit in that channel, and how much data that's going to be able to deliver down to endpoint devices. So again, bandwidth, how much data can be sent and received through a cellular connection, usually measured in kilobits, megabits, gigabits. Latency. This is the amount of time it takes for data to send or receive. Essentially, when you input a command, let's say that you're on YouTube and you hit play on a video, this is the amount of time for that command to be delivered via the cellular connection up to YouTube servers, it to process that command and then get back and actually play that video. We all know today that's a pretty seamless process, but what isn't? buffering. Sometimes it takes quite a bit of time for the server or that endpoint to download that video. And so the latency between you trying to watch the video in its entirety and how long it actually takes it to buffer or load is really a great way to think about latency. Latency is what prevents applications from being real time. LTE is known for its latency in outlying areas or challenging areas especially. And 5G promises, along with multi-access edge compute that we'll talk about on the next slide, to reduce that amount of time between your input command and receiving data back for digestion and use. To make data really more real time than ever. And we'll talk about, again, how that's going to impact law enforcement in a number of applications. Lastly, multi-access edge compute. This is bringing the compute process or the data analysis or crunch process closer to the end user or application and away from the often distant cloud. So today, when you again click on a command or you input a command in your computer, that is conveyed. Let's take an officer doing record management out on his MDT in his squad car. That's conveyed perhaps to the router solution or the hotspot solution that is connecting that MDT to the internet. That's sent all the way up to that CAD or that RMS server, sometimes hundreds of miles away, wherever your software provider's server farm is or data center is. Sometimes that's thousands of miles away. So what we're talking about when we say that compute process is we're really bringing that compute process closer to your application. So in this case, we're bringing it closer to that officer in his squad on his MDT. So when he needs data and he needs it now, it's actually crunched closer to the tower on these multi-access edge compute servers that a lot of the carriers are going to be building out on those 5G sites, cells, cores. And that's going to be a way to, again, enable real-time data. And that's how 5G is going to deliver on that promise of reduced latency. One last thing, because I think it's a very simple analogy to understand in terms of multi-access edge compute and latency, is imagine that you order a pizza. As a general rule of thumb, the farther away that pizza place is from your house where you're expecting to eat that pizza, receive and eat that pizza, the longer time it takes for you to get and eat that pizza. If the pizza shop is a lot closer to your house, that's going to drastically reduce that amount of delivery time. You'll get your pizza faster and you'll eat and digest that pizza faster. Same way with your information on a 5G network. Multi-access edge compute is going to reduce that latency. You're going to get that data back a lot quicker, almost in near or in real time, and you're going to be able to digest and use that information. So I know that was a lot to take in, especially about latency and multi-access edge compute, but these two things are very critically important to 5G and how it's going to enable law enforcement to improve efficiency and safety in field operations. So we're moving on to the exciting part of the application, the new 5G, or the webinar rather, the new 5G applications. We're going to talk about a few. This is only a few. There are dozens more out there that we could have talked about, but these are really ones that I found exciting. First, real-time video and what that means, AR integration into video, smart safety response. And so we'll talk about all of these and really dive in and dream a little bit about how 5G is going to enable some of these exciting applications. First and foremost, real-time 4K or 8K video access. So we talked a lot about how multi-access edge compute is going to bring that data crunch analysis process closer to the endpoint, in this case with real-time video, the surveillance camera, dash camera, in-vehicle camera system, or body camera on that officer's vest or uniform. And so when we bring that closer, we reduce the latency, and we also combine the fact that we're pushing more throughput and bandwidth through that 5G network, sometimes up to a gigabit to 10 gigabit, if you can take advantage of high band 5G or wideband 5G. That is going to enable key command staff and analysts and support staff or dispatchers to access live video streams in real time without sacrificing any kind of resolution. Moreover, that's going to allow this video to be stored in real time up in cloud data server applications where it can be retrieved without having to be compressed and then uncompressed. We all know when you compress video, you sacrifice quality. So ultimately, being able to access HD 4K to 8K video in real time without having to do any kind of compression on the storage side is going to help in an incredible way in terms of reviewing surveillance footage as it relates to an ongoing investigation or otherwise. No longer are officers going to have to squint at grainy videos and try to say, well, I think this happened, or we think we see this. They're going to have a crystal clear image in which they will know without a shadow of doubt what they're going to see. Also, what's exciting is that with the increased capacity for bandwidth and throughput and for the reduced latency with multi-access edge compute, you're going to be able to integrate some softwares into those surveillance cameras or in-car cameras. These are things like facial recognition, biometric data. For example, how far is this person's eyes apart, or are these person's eyes apart, or how deep are their eye sockets? Is there inset in their face? How wide is their face, etc. And then also weapon detection software where they're going to be able to key in on anything that has the semblance of a firearm on the person's body at any given time, or if they're brandishing that out in the public. So these are going to be very exciting applications because, again, not only is that going to help investigators do their job more effectively, but it will also allow key command staff and law enforcement to make decisions, better decisions, and more well-informed decisions in real time, thus reducing the amount of department liability in terms of efficiency and safety, either for the officer or for the community at large that they are sworn to protect. So exciting things about real-time video access in a number of different ways, all enabled by 5G networks. Let's move on and talk about AR integration. Specifically, we're going to talk about how AR can be integrated with SWAT helmets. So imagine your SWAT helmet is integrated with a live camera, or similar to a body camera, just integrated into that helmet. It's got a visor that doubles as a screen display for that SWAT officer when they're going on site or they're storming a building or whatever that situation and event response might look like. There's a lot of things that go on. First, they might be going into an unknown building. Well, what if they could have real-time building data in terms of the floor plans, blueprints, alarm locations, and other mission-critical data streamed directly to that SWAT helmet with that displayable visor that is integrated into it? What if command staff can tap in, like we just talked about, to that live stream in real time without sacrificing any clarity? What if we're integrating different applications into that video stream in that SWAT helmet, like heat detection in the event that there is a fire or a heat hazard in that building, or a toxic fume or toxic gas sensor into that architecture as well? And so all of a sudden, you're enabling SWAT teams to be more efficient and safe in their field operation with all of this data that wasn't available in real time to them anymore. Ultimately, again, 5G is going to deliver this through increased capacity, bandwidth, reduced latency through multi-edge compute. Very exciting stuff. Again, all poised to increasing safety and efficiency in field operations for that SWAT team. And this doesn't only go for a SWAT team, but this can be integrated, of course, into any other field operation there in the law enforcement community. Lastly, we're going to round out our emerging application section by talking about smart city safety response. A couple different layers here. I will preface this by saying that this relies heavily on the increased capacity of 5G networks, or the amount of clients that you can concurrently connect onto the network and send data down to. It's also going to rely on reduced latency multi-access edge compute to offer real-time data back to key command staff and analysts and dispatch. So we'll walk through a simulation here. So imagine a city. The city has a very sophisticated gunshot detection system deployed throughout the entire city for blocks and blocks and blocks. Now imagine a gunshot goes off, and that gunshot detection system is on it as it's designed immediately, and they triangulate the direct location of that gunshot. And so what's really cool through a feature called sensor queuing, once the gunshot detection system locates the origin point of that gunshot, it can relay that data through multi-access edge compute over to a nearby surveillance camera. The surveillance camera has pan, tilt, zoom capabilities. It can swivel over and it can lock in on that perp. Now, what if this camera also has integrated facial recognition technology and weapon detection technology? Well, it detects the weapon, okay, confirmed, and then also it gets a snapshot and analyzes the face of that person brandishing the weapon that discharged that shot. Now, key command staff has a full profile of this person. They know what location they are. Dispatch knows where the closest responding officer is to the origin point of this event. And more than that, if that person takes off on foot, fleeing, through sensor queuing, the camera can follow that person until it's out of its range and field of vision, and then tee up the next camera to pan, tilt, zoom, and pick up where that first camera left off, so on and so forth. So key command staff, as long as there's not a blind spot, has a clear line of sight and an uninterrupted line of sight and eyes on that fleeing perpetrator. So all this, again, enabled through 5G technology with sophisticated AI integration into surveillance, with the massive capacity of 5G to support all these gunshot detection sensors and cameras concurrently, along with any responding officer's equipment, and then sensor queuing through multi-access edge compute, firing that data off to the next camera, off to the next sensor to keep eyes on the situation at all times. I think more than anything, I'm really excited about this because it's drastically going to improve the efficiency of field operations and response time in order to protect the public better, and of course, protect men and women out there, sworn officers in the field that are responding to these events to protect their communities. So that concludes our dreaming section of our presentation today, the emerging applications. In review, we talked about real-time, HD, Ultra HD video access. We talked about integration of different AI technologies into SWAT helmets for improved response and safer responses to high gravity situations. And we talked about great things like sensor queuing and gunshot detection systems, all enabled through the 5G networks. Keep in mind, that's only a small snapshot of what's to come with 5G. We didn't get into drone technology. There's a lot of areas that we didn't touch on, but exciting things. So now let's pivot and talk about all this is great, but how does it, what are some tangible ways that it makes the job safer from a day-to-day basis there in the law enforcement community? We talk about three things: dispatch accuracy, less congestion, what that means in terms of response and covering events, and sensors as well. Before we dive into this, I thought this was a pretty pertinent quote. I was doing some research and stumbled across this article from Officer.com in 2019. I want to take a minute to read it to you, though. As more departments adopt gigabit class LTE and 5G begins rolling out to more cities, the job of a police officer is set to evolve. By allowing technology to face the most dangerous parts of the job, police officers in their communities will be better protected. So the reason we underline and bolded that one key line there is because it's really what we want you to take away from what 5G is going to deliver as a promise to the law enforcement community. Again, by allowing technology to face the most dangerous parts of the job, police officers in their communities will be better protected. So we're going to emphasize that technology is now going to face the most dangerous parts of the job in a number of ways. and primarily through reduced latency and increased capacity. Bandwidth is how it's going to live up to that promise of increased safety for officers in the community. So let's talk about it a little more. Accurate and timely dispatch. Quicker response and backup is possible with 5G's reduced latency. What do we mean by that? A lot of agencies out there are relying on some kind of 4G LTE router solution or hotspot, or perhaps they have some kind of GPS puck, or they have a cellular-based widget that plugs into the OBD2 port that helps track and relay GPS information back to dispatch. And oftentimes, the accuracy of that GPS is only as good as your cellular connection. So what does that mean? If a GPS is lagging behind and dispatch sees a car is actually 500 feet back or a mile back than where it actually is in terms of getting a response call in and dispatching the closest officer, then that could actually be an inaccurate showing of how quickly that officer can respond. Maybe there was another officer that happened to be close by. We don't know because there's latency. The GPS data is not real time to the T. So with 5G networks, when we reduce that amount of latency, that's going to enable real-time, true real-time GPS information and allow dispatchers to see exactly what squad unit is closer to that call response site, or in the event that an officer responding to an event requests backup, see what officer is truly the closest that they can call upon to get out there and back that responding officer up. As we know, this could shave seconds off response time, and down to little tiny seconds. They matter in law enforcement and public safety in general. Seconds can equalize, so it's very important. And so real-time GPS data with reduced latency is just one way that 5G delivers that promise of improved safety and efficiency in field operations for the officer and for the community. Secondly, improved critical emergency communication. Let's talk about events. The Super Bowl just happened this past Sunday. It was a blowout. And while there weren't nearly as many people there as there traditionally are, thanks COVID, typically there are just thousands and thousands and thousands of people, so many people, all with their mobile devices there at the center of the Super Bowl or some other large-scale event. Maybe it's a music festival, maybe it is some other professional sports game or a concert. Whatever that is, congestion stinks. I know I'm a graduate of the University of Tennessee in Knoxville, and when you were at Neyland on a game day, go Vols, sorry, I couldn't help myself, but when you're at Neyland for a game day and you try to get on your cell phone, it's just not happening. Too much congestion on the network, too many people with their mobile devices down in one area, really trying to connect to only a few key assets that don't have enough capacity to connect. So what does that mean, right? That means that when 5G comes out and they roll out, especially in areas like NFL stadiums, for example, during big events like the Super Bowl, congestion is no longer a problem. Police officers are going to be able to access all of their mission critical softwares and communications in real time without the fear that there's going to be a large amount of latency to get out to the network because of too many people condensed in one area using limited LTE resources. So that's going to be an incredible improvement in terms of efficiency and safety at those large scale response events, mainly affecting large metro areas, yes, but still important all the same. And when you think about some of the carrier offerings today, specifically those that offer quality priority preemption services, this would mean that you should, as long as your carrier of choice has ample 5G assets in that particular event area, you should not have to worry about that because everyone on the network is going to be able to use data effectively at the same time, consumers and law enforcement included in that. And lastly, we talked about it again and again, real-time data and support are going to increase automation for officers out on their beat. So an officer's out on shift, he's out on beat, he has just pulled somebody over and he's written a ticket, and he's got to update those records in his record management system. If he doesn't have the infrastructure, traditionally it says he rolls back to HQ, files all his paperwork reports for the day, or for the couple hours he's been out there, and maybe he's rolling by HQ at the time and just stops in to do that. Then he's got to get back out there, back on beat. Well, the time he spends off beat doing all of these paperworks or leveraging the high-speed internet of HQ, that's more time taken away from the people he's sworn to protect out there on beat. So that's one example of the automation gains with 5G, just being able to access all of that concurrently while out on beat, but also some of the other data streams. You'll see some screenshots from Blue Force Command here. You'll see different camera feeds. You'll see, I think on the panned out version of this picture that we had earlier in the presentation, some biometric feeds, some sensor data as well. All of that real-time information is going to provide an unprecedented amount of capability to make a decision in critical moments in terms of how to respond and how to proceed once on that response scene. So again, all enabled by 5G, that increased capacity, bandwidth / throughput, reduced latency with multi-access edge compute. So last section here, what can you do today? What can you expect? What can you do to prepare or put infrastructure in place to take advantage of 5G when it hits the market in your area? And what are next steps? So first things first, when is 5G coming? Well, low and mid bands are pretty pervasively available today. Major carriers do provide nationwide coverage. A number of them, as of 2021, where we find ourselves in February, have nationwide low band 5G coverage. Again, that 600 and 900 megahertz range, very comparable, but still an evolution to LTE today. And then carriers are predicting that they will have nationwide coverage, or pretty pervasive nationwide coverage, of mid-band by the end of 2022 into the first half, or excuse me, by the end of 2021 into the first half of 2022. So you can get infrastructure that will take advantage of that low-band 5G today. Most of it is being engineered to be compatible with mid-band technology as well. The high band rollout process, a little bit different. I mentioned earlier that it's going to be available in large metropolitan areas, predominantly very populous areas. So we're talking about the LAs, Chicago's, Houston's, Dallas, Fort Worth's, the New York City's, Atlanta, Miami's of the world. It's going to be for specific applications, high density cities and venues. As I just mentioned, another example would be at an NFL stadium. And then local areas and infrastructure is a bit different. What do we mean by that? It's going to rely on point-to-point technology. So it's not going to be as easy as having a device with a modem that can receive that. It's going to be having that device with a modem that can receive that high band or wide band, and also having the antenna infrastructure to make it work. There are a number of carriers that have wideband deployments in certain metropolitan areas today. It is very limited, and it's going to continue to build out in a number of those high density areas for the next oncoming years. How to learn more about 5G. So RCN is hosting a 5G webinar series. We're trying to be as consistent as we can as we learn more about different applications in 5G and the roadmap to having pervasive 5G out in the nation. Live in-depth information and Q&A on applications and functions. That's what you can expect. We also have RCN news and articles that we publish frequently onto our website. And then lastly, follow our social accounts. We're very active on LinkedIn and Facebook. So go and give us a follow there, and you should see new developments and announcements and some more bite-sized 5G info that we're going to try to keep rolling out to you. Scott Swisher mentioned earlier that we are an LTE and 5G enablement company, or 5G and LTE enablement specialist. So we want to take this very seriously and deliver the 5G news that you're looking for out on the market today, and how that's going to impact you in your coverage area. So what can you do today to plan for 5G? Well, first things first, you can engage the RCN account manager team for the law enforcement community. Consider us your technology ally. We can sit down with you and talk about your 5G roadmap and connectivity plan heading into the next 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 years, whatever that strategic plan looks like. We'd love to have a conversation about it to see where you would like to take your footprint there for your department or agency. And we have a team of dedicated public sector sellers too, and we're going to be able to speak your language pretty efficiently in terms of budget constraints and purchasing contracts and all that great red tape that the government has to deal with on a day-to-day basis. And then also, you can start investing in 5G forward capabilities today. I did mention that there are some endpoints that do support low and mid-band 5G today. It's hard to find one that truly supports high band that's pervasively available, but that is coming. But the MO here for law enforcement agencies is when you go to buy anything SIM-based from now moving forward, let 5G be at the forefront of your mind. Come to RCN to demystify some of the marketing out there and also set you down a good path with great recommendations that are going to cover those bands that are going to enable some of these great applications that we talked about today. Again, this is just a recap. We do want to help. We specialize in equipping and connecting law enforcement agencies from anything SIM-based, LTE, or 5G. We want to simplify that process, as I said, cutting through some of that marketing mist, really delivering you the truth of 5G today, the state of 5G today, with solutions that are compatible or optimized for 5G today. And whether that is a SIM-based routing solution for your vehicle fleet and your squad cars, or whether that is a ruggedized Toughbook or other ruggedized tablet or computer, laptop that supports a SIM card, we want to partner with you to help make the best qualified solution that is going to set you up for success in the 5G era.
Reed, are you ready to answer some of the questions in the chat today?
Yeah, we're to the Q&A, so I'm absolutely ready. So Scott, hit me with the questions.
First question in the chat today is from Benjamin. He asked, what is the feasibility of 5G to provide low lag video / streaming? It seems that the data that you're talking about needs to be almost instantaneous.
Yeah, absolutely. So I would say that there's a very high possibility that you will be able to have real-time data and video capabilities on a 5G network. So we talked about how low-band 5G is very comparable to LTE networks today. We also mentioned that LTE networks do have challenges. One thing that's going to be great, and one of the biggest challenges of LTE, is that it has latency because it doesn't propagate as far. But with a lot of low-band 5G riding that 600 megahertz band, propagating very far into rural or challenging areas, that will be a steady connection source, not as big on the throughput or bandwidth, but as we move into the mid-band 5G range and we're topping out with equipment that offers a gig download, upload speed, that data should absolutely be real-time and instantaneous. Now, with any cellular solution, the limitation is going to be the infrastructure and whatever coverage area the application is being used in. But I do suspect predominantly in metro areas and also in densely populated suburban areas, you should be able to see pervasive mid-band coverage that is going to enable some of this real-time information with reduced latency.
Thanks, Reed. The next question in the chat is from Chris. She asked, what do you suggest agencies begin doing now to prepare for 5G?
Yeah, great question. Appreciate you asking that, Chris. What I would recommend, one, is instead of doing a lot of the research yourself, because there's just so much out there, it's so noisy out on the internet and social media pertaining to 5G today, even on TV commercials right now, what I would recommend is get on the phone with either your dedicated cellular carrier rep and have that conversation about when is 5G going to be available in my area, what flavor is going to be available, low, mid, or high band. Make sure you understand that so your expectations are set properly. And then what I would do is go to a 5G specialization company like RCN Technologies and take us up on that free consultation. Let's talk about what technologies you can institute today that are going to be 5G compatible on low band today, mid band tomorrow, and wideband eventually, depending on your area. So that is my recommendation, is instead of trying to become the expert yourself, there are people that are specialists out there today, inclusive of your cellular carriers and folks like RCN that deal with this day in, day out. So we'd be happy to set you down the right path. And if you want to have a conversation for law enforcement, specifically around fleet connectivity or backing, maybe you want to do primary wireless and cut your wireline solution, or at least back up your fiber line with reliable cellular in the event of an internet outage, we can have those conversations today and make sure you get something in place that will support 5G going forward.
Thank you, Reed. And last question we have in the chat today is, when can we expect 5G hardware to become available?
Great question. 5G hardware is actually available today with some of our manufacturers. I know for a fact that one manufacturer just released a true mid-low band 5G compatible router. And then there are others like Cradlepoint, for example, that have 5G optimized gear available today. Optimized meaning that it is future compatible with a wideband adapter that is slated to come out sometime this year to take advantage of some of those upper, mid, and high bands on 5G. So great question. There are limited options today, but there are still options, and there are great options both for that branch office environment, for example, a department HQ or for a dispatch center. Or for a mobile environment, so for a mobile command center or a vehicle fleet. So all available today, limited options. Those are going to expand tenfold over the course of even the next year. And again, I would definitely have a conversation with either your cellular carrier or folks like RCN that specialize in these type of solutions.
Thanks, Reed. That was the last question in the chat.
Awesome. Well, hey, thanks everyone for joining the webinar today. Really appreciate your questions. I hope you take something valuable away from this presentation. Scott, thank you for being the best co-host. Only the best co-hosts live in Wisconsin, and the next best ones live in Tennessee, I suppose. But thanks everyone. I hope you have a good day, and I look forward to hearing from all of you in the future.